typically, if you don't shower, then you may well be bringing in sweat and urine and other bodily fluids, etc. You may also have things like suntan cream, etc. So it's really important, even if you don't use soap, people having a pre-swim shower just helps get rid of all of that pollution, or most of it. And it's actually that pollution that combines with chlorine to give the smell. So if you do have a smell, you're smelling combined chlorine, so it's linked with something else. So it is important to pre-swim shower, and people should do it, especially if they've been running around beforehand and want to go and cool off in the pool. Better to have a shower and then go into the water.
With a pool, how often should the water be replaced?
Typically with a swimming pool, you're getting a lot of water coming out of the pool, either when people physically just get out and there's water on their body, or it's splashed out. Backwashing usually happens at least once a week, where the filters are cleaned and pool water is used. So typically there's quite a lot of water coming out of the pool each day, and there are guidance to say you should put extra fresh water in for all those reasons I've mentioned. So typically all of that dilution means you don't need to replace the water as such, because quite naturally it evolves over time anyway.
I've not really thought about all the water that comes out during the use. That's something that never crossed my mind. So they've got the water that's coming out and needs replaced daily. Are there any other daily maintenance routines that should be done?
Yeah, so we've just briefly talked about the backwashing, which is at least weekly, but on a daily basis, then the water should be tested every couple of hours for chlorine and pH, and then you've got the routine cleaning, so things like the water line and the pool surround, as well as checking things like the fittings, etc. Chlorine and pH adjustment chemicals needed also to be added in the commercial pools. So there's a range of tasks that get done just to make sure everything is working correctly and pool is set at the right water balance.
We're at peak holiday time now. Is there anything a holiday maker should look out for before they first get into a swimming pool at a hotel?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think that a couple of things that, holiday makers certainly should be vigilant from a safety point of view with their children. Don't expect their children to be being looked after necessarily. Some pools have lifeguards, some don't. And even if they do, it's always useful to be able to keep an eye. But in terms of the pool water itself, then just some common sense things. So is the general appearance of the pool okay? Is it clean? Is it tidy? Can you physically see the bottom of the pool? Is the water cloudy in any way? And certainly be interesting if they allow, inflatables onto the water in some swimming pools. And that's always a risk, not necessarily from a hygiene point of view, but just to make sure that nobody's sort of falling in and not being noticed if they go into the water.
Yeah. You said right at the very beginning there's no EU guidelines on how a pool should be maintained, but are there any countries with rules that make you think twice before you get in?
No, I think typically, having worked with a number of countries setting some standards for domestic pools recently, I think most countries have reasonable standards. Some, like Germany, as you might imagine, have very, very strict standards. So, there's some countries that we potentially can look across it around Europe to find some really excellent practice. But no, I think most countries are okay in Europe when you go there. But it's always worth checking the individual pools to make sure that there's nothing, on the surface of the water that's not being sucked away by the skimmers at the top of the water that take that top layer of water off to get filtered.
When you just mentioned Germany, I had a flashback to when I went on a school trip to Austria. I had to take my swimming shorts off and put some budgie smugglers on. I just wasn't happy with that at all.
Absolutely, they prefer smaller costumes and clothing just for the cleanliness. Yeah, you're quite right.
Oh, the nightmares are going to start again. You can follow me on Twitter @holiday_hut. I'm speaking to Chris Hayes, who's the MD at Sparta, which is the Swimming Pool and Allied Trades Association. We've been talking about what to look out for before you go into a pool with the maintenance, but there are probably some of you out there who fancy a pool of their own. I know I do. I know my wife does. She keeps nagging at me, get a proper job so I can have a swimming pool. So it's a big purchasing decision. So I wanted to find out how Sparta can help the consumer make the right decision.
Sparta was formed in 1961, and it's a trade association. Originally started as a pool builders association, and then there's a range of other allied trades, service companies, maintenance, equipment suppliers, wholesalers, etc., consultants, so a range of people involved in swimming pools. So there's about 170 odd members currently who are based all over the UK, and we've got some overseas members as well.
How do you protect the consumer?
So we're a trade association. First and foremost, we're there for our members, but we expect our members to work to industry standards, and we also expect them to abide by a code of ethics. So hopefully customers, consumers will be able to get greater peace of mind when they're dealing with our members.
I'm pretty sure everybody has the dream of having their own swimming pool at home, but what sort of questions should people ask when choosing a company to install the pool, and whether they should have a pool in the first place?
Yeah, I think it's important to have a sort of a list of questions in your mind. On Sparta's website, we've produced a checklist for consumers that they can look at, and it's simple things like, what size pool do you really need? How deep does it need to be? Do you want to dive into it? Are there other sort of features that you might want, waterfalls, etc., or slides? So a range of those things. Make sure that you get a quote from any pool contractor that you choose to use, and we'd always suggest getting at least 3 quotes. Check them. Are there any planning consents required, etc.? So there's a range of questions that are pertinent, and then the obvious one at the end is to make sure that you know what's being built, and if there are any extra costs for other things that you might want to add to the pool, like automatic safety covers or safety fencing. There's a range of different things that people will often choose to want to discuss, but I say that is available from our website if people would like a copy.
Okay. Of all the private pools, what's the easiest one to maintain?
I guess the owners will each say their own pools. There's liners and concrete pools, one-piece pools, but I guess typically, as long as everything is on the water balance is maintained correctly, then the most robust is a concrete and tile pool. So I guess that would be the answer.
When you look back at your history in swimming pools, what's the most unusual one you've been involved in?
Certainly our members build all kinds of interesting shapes that are not typically rectangular shapes, although that's the most popular, but free-form shapes. I've seen images, I wasn't involved directly, but I've seen images of somebody who had a guitar-shaped swimming pool. But quite often pools, they're going high up on balconies now for wonderful views across either city skyscrapes, or they're going across other areas like mountains, etc. But equally, you can have them deep underground, so people have second and third level basement swimming pools in London and some of the other cities. So I guess they're the interesting and challenging ones.
You've already mentioned there's a list of tips on your website, so how can we find out about the website and more about Sparta? Yeah,
people, if they visit www.spata.co.uk, and you'll see a range of information there that's available. Most of it is free of charge to members and also to consumers. You'd also find a list of our members on the site as well if people want to make contact.
And finally, the question everybody's probably thinking about: does the water really change colour?
Yeah, we get asked this a lot. It's generally an urban myth. There were a couple of films that showed bathers urinating in the water and then it changing colour. So I think it makes a good story for parents to be able to say to their children, "Don't pee in the pool." But I'm sure in future somebody may come up with a product, but certainly at the moment I'm not aware of anything that's commercially available on the market. But it does make a good headline.
It does, yeah. Okay, Chris, thanks for your time.
Many thanks, John.
You can keep up to date with travel news and leave me a message at facebook.com/John Guinn Travel Show. If you've got any swimming pool horror stories, please do share them. facebook.com/John Guinn Travel Show. And now Arizona. My interview with Tony Alba, who represents the Arizona Tourist Board, was done over Skype. So every now and again the sound gets a little bit ropey, but please do bear with it because Tony does share some very interesting information. Arizona is on one of my to-go places. I've done Nevada, but I haven't done Arizona. Being in the open space with nobody around, well, hopefully, really appeals to me, the peace and quiet. I never used to be like that when I was before I moved into my last house, I was a townie. I loved the noise. I needed to go to London every now and again just to hear all the traffic and stuff, just to keep me going. But now I'm all into peace and quiet, and Arizona has plenty of that. Anyway, the first thing we need to know about the state of Arizona is where it is.
Well, Arizona is in the southwestern portion of the United States. We're actually bordered by California to the west, Utah to the north, New Mexico on the east, and Mexico to the south. So we share a border with Mexico. So it is in the southwestern portion of the United States. It's fortunately, we have great air service from the UK. Mm-hmm. There's a daily nonstop on British Airways that comes right into Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. Phoenix is the state capital, and we do have a great airport, Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. So there's a number of carriers, including British Airways, with the daily nonstop that provide service between Phoenix and London. So you can fly British Airways, you can fly American or Delta, Air France, Lufthansa, United, any number of options. But British Airways does have that daily nonstop flight.
So it's quite easy to get to you.
Yes, very easy. You can, if you don't do the nonstop, you can save a little bit of money. The nonstop is a little bit more expensive, mm-hmm. But you can do a connecting flight through Philadelphia, New York, Atlanta, a number of different options to get here.
What's the weather like in Arizona? I mean, is there a popular season for visitors?
You know, it really depends. Arizona is a very diverse state. So many people that have not been here, they're not aware of the diversity in the climate and the landscape. So in northern Arizona, we actually have the largest ponderosa pine forest in the world up in northern Arizona. It's in the Coconino National Forest. So we have pine forest to the north, we've got the desert here in the middle, and then high desert down to the south. A very diverse landscape. So it really depends on the time of year. For example, our temperature today will probably be in the low 40s Celsius, mm-hmm. but 100 miles to the north of here, they'll probably be down in the high 20s or near 30. So it really depends on the area. So the best time to come, there really isn't a best time. If you like the heat, you can come now and enjoy Phoenix and Tucson, but just an hour away, you have very cool, very comfortable weather. So it really just depends on the time of year. We are in our low season here in the desert in Phoenix and in Tucson right now just because of the heat. But they're in the high travel season up at the Grand Canyon and in Flagstaff and some of the areas to the north. This is their peak travel season. And then in the wintertime, it just becomes the opposite. They'll be in their low season just because it does snow up there, and there is a lot of the potential for some inclement weather, but it's beautiful here in the desert. So it's opposite. So right now, the northern part of the state is high season. We're in the low season. In the wintertime, it's just the opposite. In terms of ideal times, the spring is beautiful in both parts of the state, so March, April, into May even, and then in the fall, October, November is also great in all parts of the state. So it just really depends. There's never a bad time.
So if you're touring the state, you really need to take clothes for every eventuality.
Yes, exactly. Particularly in the wintertime. People don't realize that we do have some very high mountains here in the northern part of the state and in the southern part of the state. We actually have 3 distinct ski resorts here in Arizona. People don't often think of snow skiing in Arizona. So in the wintertime particularly, you need to be prepared for cold weather as well as very mild weather here in the desert.
Checking it out before you check in on the John Guinn Travel Show on ukhealthradio.com. Still to come, 107 travel tips, including one on how to keep warm when you're flying. Not only does it keep you warmer, it's probably a lot cleaner than using the blanket that the airline supplies you with. My guest at the moment is Tony Alba. He represents the Arizona Tourist Board. He's already covered some of the basics of the state, but I wanted you to know what was the